Thanks for tuning in to the Football Game Tonight podcast. I'm your host, John Kuzma. There was a lot of action from around the NFL today. The Rams signed Davante Adams, so that was a big pickup for the Rams. And the other big story that happened, which we're going to talk about in this latest episode, was the Steelers trading for DK Metcalf. So the Seahawks sent DK Metcalf packing, and DK Metcalf landed with the Steelers in Pittsburgh. I think this is a big move for the Steelers, considering how long they've been trying to figure things out on the offensive side of the ball. And to be able to get DK Metcalf, a guy that's really going to bring something to that football team, let's be honest, it's a big splash for the Steelers. So DK Metcalf gets traded for a second-round pick. You know, the Steelers only had to give up a second-round pick to get DK Metcalf, which, you know, is going to be a big addition for this team. And, you know, DK Metcalf gets a new 5-year, $150 million contract. Let's just say it. DK Metcalf got paid, so the Steelers weren't afraid to open up their checkbook, then make sure that DK Metcalf was taken care of. Because if you're going to trade for a guy, you know, you want him to be a part of the long-term picture. You want him to be a big piece of the puzzle, so to say. So they made sure DK Metcalf was taken care of. They open up the checkbook, give him a new 5-year, $150 million contract. Let's just say it, you know, DK Metcalf got paid. So the Rooney family doing what they always do, you know, running a first-class organization, a team that always tries to do right by their players. You know, we all know about the stability they've had at the head coaching position with Mike Tomlin, with Bill Cowher, with Chuck Noll. You know, this is a team that's all about stability and all about doing right by their players. They lived up to those expectations by taking care of DK Metcalf right away. You know, a new 5-year, $150 million contract. So DK Metcalf has to be happy about that. You know, he gets shipped out by the Seahawks, and we heard reports that he wanted to go somewhere that was warm weather. You know, obviously Pittsburgh, not a warm weather team. They play up in Pittsburgh, a northern city. They have an outdoor stadium. Trust me, it's going to be cold in Pittsburgh. But a new $150 million contract, that kind of eases your tension a little bit when you don't go to a warm weather team. You end up going to a cold weather team in Pittsburgh. But hey, a new $150 million contract. You got a great head coach in Mike Tomlin, a guy that's going to mentor and, look out for DK Metcalf. So I think it is a good fit, you know, especially when you look at the Steelers that were, you know, for a while now, just trying to find the right pieces on the offensive side of the ball, kind of get it figured out. DK Metcalf, you know, solves, you know, a portion of the puzzle for them. There's no doubt about that. So, you know, then you look at the big picture. DK Metcalf is going to team up with George Pickens. And, you know, what that really means is the Steelers are going to have weapons all over the field. They got playmakers now. They got guys that can catch the ball. They got guys that can get open, guys that can run and put pressure on these opposing secondaries. So it's a team that's just more well-rounded offensively. There's no debating that. DK Metcalf certainly helps in that regard. And like I said, for a team that's been looking for their offense identity, a team that's been trying to figure it out, so to say, they got a lot closer to where they want to be. This is a team that can suddenly put some points on the board. And they're much tougher to defend. You're going to have to game plan a lot longer to stop all these weapons that the Steelers have on offense. And they've got a little bit here, got a little bit there. But over time, it starts to add up. And that's what we're seeing in Pittsburgh, because they're going to be much more dynamic. They're going to be a much more potent offense. So I like the direction that they're heading. You have to give the front office a lot of credit for, you know, just scoring these small victories, and then, the cherry on top of all that ends up being DK Metcalf. So they got it together. And anytime a team gets it together, you have to applaud what they're doing. And I think we're at that point when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think we're at that point. They deserve their praise. They made the moves to get to this point. Look around the NFL. There's a lot of teams that aren't making these kind of moves. There's a lot of teams that haven't arrived at the point that the Pittsburgh Steelers are at now. The reason the Pittsburgh Steelers are here because, they make a small move for Van Jefferson. They go get Mike Williams. They have a guy in Pat Freiermuth that can make plays. They added Donald Parham. So you make those moves and then you get DK Metcalf on top of them. That's how you wind up where the Pittsburgh Steelers are right now. So you have to applaud them for that. And, I think they found it. I think this team is going to be very tough to double team. You can't just double George Pickens anymore. Last year, before Mike Williams, the teams were, and in particular, defensive coordinators were just so focused on taking George Pickens out of the game. You take George Pickens out of the game, suddenly you're looking around and trying to figure out who can beat you. Maybe the running backs, Warren and Harris, can get it going, and that can be a threat to you. Maybe Pat Freiermuth in the end zone, but, without Pickens, you're looking at a B offense, a C offense, somewhere in that range. If Pickens goes off, suddenly they're around a B+ offense. But you add, DK Metcalf into the mix, and suddenly you get bumped up to, at the very least, the A- range. So now you're talking about an A offense because they do have the playmakers that can put pressure on these defensive backs, put pressure on these secondaries, can expose corners, can get over top of the safeties. Those are the things you need to be able to do to win in the National Football League. And I think the personnel is right with this Steelers football team because of DK Metcalf, because of George Pickens. And then, you think about in the past, teams were double teaming George Pickens, and that was the whole focus of these defensive coordinators' game plans. Take George Pickens out of the game. Well, now you have a guy on the opposite side of the field, DK Metcalf, that can stretch the field vertically. He can run past defenders. He's always been a vertical threat. He's always been a guy that can take the top off the defense. He's very good at doing that. Ever since he came in to the National Football League out of Ole Miss, DK Metcalf has been capable of doing those things. So he's going to be able to go vertical against one-on-one coverage if you decide, hey, we're still going to focus on George Pickens. Well, guess what? DK Metcalf just ran right by you. He caught the football over top, and now he's trotting into the end zone for 6. Not only that, George Pickens is a flashy player, but DK Metcalf is a big physical target that's almost like a power forward in basketball. He can box out defenders. It's hard for defenders to get around DK Metcalf and break up the pass. It's hard. He's just got such a big frame that it takes an extra second and a half to get around him to break up the pass. And that can be the difference between winning or losing on a play, especially when you're a cornerback that's just bang, bang plays. You have to react instantaneously. And if you lose a second or a second and a half, you're not going to be able to be there to break up the pass. That's what DK Metcalf can bring to this football team. He's a big guy. He can box you out. He can go vertical. He makes a lot of plays. And I just think he's going to be a great addition for this Steelers football team. I think they got significantly better because of this trade. I think he makes them much more dynamic. I think the stage is set for this offense, and I think they're capable of delivering the goods. I really do. I really do think they're capable of delivering the goods. Now, in the past, I was a little iffy on them. I like George Pickens, and I knew he could make plays from time to time. But without DK Metcalf, like I said, so much attention is getting rolled over to George Pickens' side of the field. You just can't do that anymore. You have to play this Steelers offense more honestly, which tilts the odds in the Steelers' favor. It tilts the odds in the Steelers' favor because now you have to play them more cover two with safeties over top on both sides. You know, when you have a George Pickens type guy, you can roll a cover six towards him. Cover six means the corner on George Pickens' side stays in the flats. They have a safety over top, and there's a safety playing middle field. So that safety over top can help with Pickens, and that safety playing midfield right in the middle, like a free safety, deep middle third, can also flow over to George Pickens' side. So you almost have two safeties over top on George Pickens' side if that middle third safety can read the quarterback's eyes and get to the football. And then that backside corner would be bailing. But what are you going to do? Are you going to roll a cover six over to George Pickens' side and leave a backside corner in a deep third against DK Metcalf? I'm taking that throw every single time, a one-on-one deep down the field to DK Metcalf. And with his size, his speed, his ability to jump and go up and get the football, you know, you have to like your odds in that situation. And then what happens if they decide, okay, we're going to game plan for DK Metcalf and we're going to roll that cover six to DK Metcalf's side? Now you have George Pickens one-on-one against a backside corner that's playing deep third. And you have to like that matchup too. So you can see what it does, at least from a zone standpoint, cover six, where you roll it towards one side of the field. It's just not going to work anymore. So what do? You have to play a more balanced defense. You have to play a cover two because you have to keep a safety over each wide receiver. You have to have a corner in the flats, taking away the underneath stuff, hopefully maybe getting a jam on one of these receivers and, you know, rerouting them a little bit. But still, you're not going to jam DK Metcalf. You might be able to get a jam off on George Pickens, but even then, George Pickens is a pretty fluid guy. He could easily make you miss on the jam. And now you're putting a lot of pressure on that safety over top. It's going to create problems. It's going to create favorable matchups for the Steelers offense. And then you talk about, well, what if they play man? What if you have great corners and you can play man and play a little cover one? Tell you right now, you're not playing cover zero against this offense. You know, you're not going to all out blitz and play cover zero, at least not often, because one of these receivers is going to get free. He's going to beat you. So you talk about cover one, manned up with a free safety over top. Okay, you can do that. But if, you know, the free safety that is on the opposing team, you know, Minkah Fitzpatrick is on the Steelers, so it's not going to be Minkah Fitzpatrick. But the opposing team's free safety, you know, if he can't flow to the ball, if he can't read the quarterback's eyes, and he can't, you know, double over top on the play side wherever the football is being thrown to, it's just not going to work. You know, good quarterbacks struggle against zone because you can kind of fool the quarterbacks with zone and you can mix your zones up and you can sprinkle a little bit of man. And if you don't have great corners, like I think about the New England Patriots defenses, they were able to play a lot of man with Bill Belichick because they had a good front seven that could get pressure and they had great cover guys. But when you go against such a high-flying offense that the Steelers are now, it just creates a lot of matchup problems. And now your corners and man coverage have to be damn near perfect. You know, someone falls, someone blows an assignment, someone's just simply outgunned because they're going against a supreme talent like DK Metcalf or a George Pickens. Suddenly you're beat. You're beat, and now you're behind in the football game because the Steelers just put points on the board. You don't want to do that. So I really think teams are going to have to play a lot of cover two. a lot of cover 3 against this offense and just keep as much as they can in front of them. Because when you have a DK Metcalf or a George Pickens, they're good at getting over top. Both of them are. How many times have we seen George Pickens get over top, catch the football, and run to the end zone? You know, you got to keep everything in front of them. And the best way to do that is cover 2, cover 3, and, you know, you keep your safeties deep and you keep the play in front of you, and you have a bend but don't break defense where you make the opposing offense have a lot of big plays down the field to beat you. Like, you make them sustain long drives, 15, 16 play drives. You don't give up the one home run and let them beat you. You make them have a 7-yard gain, a 10-yard gain, a 6-yard gain, a 4-yard gain, a 20-yard gain, but nothing comes easy. You just keep forcing them to stay on the field and beat you, and eventually what happens is usually the offense makes a mistake because the defense is practicing so much with their cover 2 and cover 3 that they don't think, they just react. So when they just react and they practice it so much in practice, it becomes like a second nature to them. And when offenses have to go against that, that's how they beat you. They keep everything in front of you. They play their cover 2s, they cover their cover 3s, and they hope that sooner or later the offense shoots themselves in the foot. That's how teams are going to have to play this Steelers team. You know, because if you play man and you just let them hit a home run on you, then, you know, that's not playing in your favor. That's tilting the odds in the Steelers' favor. So I just think the defense is going to have to play off. I think they're going to have to play cover 2, cover 3, keep DK Metcalf and George Pickens in front of them and make them sustain long drives, and not just one big play that goes for a touchdown, but big play after big play after big play, and then you just keep making them chip away at you, and then eventually what happens is the offense shoots themselves in the foot, or at least that's how you expect your game plan to go. You know, like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a game plan until they get punched in the face. And with this Steelers offense, they might punch a lot of people in the face. This team might be throwing a lot of haymakers, because even if you keep everything in front of you, even if you play a lot of cover 2 or cover 3, guess what? You might be outgunned when you go against George Pickens or DK Metcalf, because they can deliver that haymaker and knock your lights out. That's how good they are. It doesn't matter if you game plan. Like I said, everybody's got a game plan until they get punched in the face. And sometimes you're outgunned because the personnel is just too good, which might be the case with the Steelers. You know, I really like, you know, the other players this team has too. You go down the list and you look at the other guys, you know, Pat Freiermuth, Mike Williams. I like those guys in the 3 or 4 spot. This team still has Van Jefferson. I like that addition that they did. They went out and got Donald Parham. I think he can be good for this team in the red zone. So when you look at this collection of talent from top to bottom, you know, DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, Mike Williams, Van Jefferson, Donald Parham, this whole offense is light years better than the Steelers have been in the past. They're light years better. This is a team that has reinvented themselves on the offensive side of the ball. They're a completely different team than we've seen in the past. And just looking at this team on paper right now, I get the feeling we're looking at a playoff team. I think they're going to be very good because Mike Tomlin always gets the job done defensively. Their Achilles heel has always been on the offensive side of the ball. Now, with how good they are on offense, I think you have both sides of the ball taken care of. I really do. I think both sides of the ball are taken care of, and I think they're going to be very good because they're well-rounded, you know, and they're a complete football team. For the longest time, TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick, Mike Tomlin overseeing things, they were getting the job done on the defensive side of the ball, but they weren't strong enough offensively, since Ben Roethlisberger retired. I think they finally arrived at that point where now they're a two-way football team. They're good enough offensively, and they're good enough defensively. And it's just a really solid foundation. Players win games in the National Football League. Players win games. Your talent wins games. Talent trumps everything in the National Football League. And I think the Steelers have the talent to be a playoff team. I think they're going to punch their ticket. I do think they're going to be a playoff team. Now, how well these guys blend will determine whether they can go on a deep playoff run or not. But with the collection of talent they have, I do think they will punch their ticket and be a playoff team. So they've at least got the job done when it comes to adding the right personnel and putting together a good collection of talent. They've evolved. They've evolved as a football team, particularly on the offense side of the ball, and I don't think they've been this talented since Ben Roethlisberger was there. You go back and you look at some of the guys they've had, Mike Wallace, Emmanuel Sanders, Antonio Brown. I don't think they've been this good offensively, until you go back to some of those names we've just mentioned. At least not post-Roethlisberger. They haven't been this talented post-Roethlisberger. This is the best they've had since Ben Roethlisberger retired. There's no debating that. Nobody can push back on what I just said. You would be wrong. This is the best team they've had offensively since Ben Roethlisberger retired. I think they're going to be very good. Now, some people might have doubts about all the big personalities they have, but we know Tomlin dealt with Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, so this is the right guy to reel in Pickens and Metcalf. It's the right guy. I think Mike Tomlin can handle it. I think Mike Tomlin can get these guys to buy in. And some people will be like, well, Mike Tomlin was there and George Pickens was already frustrated. But some of that frustration comes from losing football games. Some of that frustration comes with the musical chairs they played at quarterback. Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, the guys they've had before that. It can be frustrating for a quarterback, especially moments in time when the offense was non-existent, especially moments in time when George Pickens was desperate just to get a good pass. He just wanted someone that could feed him the football. And I think now with DK Metcalf, now there's going to be a lot more balls to go around because there's going to be a lot more open receivers running freely in this offense. Guys are going to get open. Guys are going to make plays. That's just the fact and the reality of the situation because there's so many weapons all over the field. And goes back to what we were talking about when people try to game plan. You can't game plan as well when there's this much talent on the field. And, I think, when we look at the equation, a playoff team, talent all over the field, the right guy overseeing everything, because George Pickens is a hothead, DK Metcalf can be a hothead. You got the right guy overseeing everything, and Mike Tomlin, I think he's going to get the guys to be motivated, and I think he's going to bring out the best out of those players. So you have the talent. You're good on offense, plus you're good on defense. You have the right guy overseeing everything, a proven winner in Mike Tomlin, a guy that is known for motivating his players. I think when you step back and you look at the big picture, you look at the equation, they're checking a lot of boxes. Go down the list. They're checking a lot of boxes. And I think the stage has been set for a new quarterback to come into this situation. Now, I don't have any sources on this. This is purely speculation, but don't be surprised if the Steelers' next quarterback ends up being Aaron Rodgers. Now, hear me out. I just think with the moves they made, Aaron Rodgers makes sense for the Steelers. Look, Russell Wilson started off good, but by the end of last season, it was obvious that he's not the answer. Russell Wilson had his audition with this team. I don't think it worked out. If we're being honest, Sam Darnold also collapsed at the end of last season with the Vikings. So if it were me running this team with weapons all over the field, I think Aaron Rodgers makes sense for the Steelers because it would give the Steelers something different, something new, and they would be just so much more talented than they've been in the past. You have one of the best throwers of the football of all time in Aaron Rodgers. And here's the other thing. I think Mike Tomlin is smart enough to see through the backlash that Aaron Rodgers has gotten. I think he's smart enough to realize that Aaron Rodgers is still a very good football player that, maybe has gotten a bad rap a little bit, but I don't think Mike Tomlin cares about that. I think the only thing Mike Tomlin cares about is winning football games. He's not going to care what you or anybody else thinks about Aaron Rodgers. He's thinking about winning another Super Bowl. Who's the right guy to do that? Well, Russell Wilson caved at the end of last year. Justin Fields got replaced by Russell Wilson. I think the right guy for the job is Aaron Rodgers. I think with those weapons, Aaron Rodgers can get those guys the football. And I think Mike Tomlin's the guy to oversee it all and make it all work. He's got the right ingredients with DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and then adding Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. That's the big splash the Steelers need to make. Sam Darnold caved at the end of last season with the Vikings. It showed that the stage might be a little too big for Sam Darnold when you get to the playoffs. Russell Wilson caved at the end of last season. Justin Fields got replaced by Russell Wilson. To me, with those wide receivers, you need a pure passer. You need a future Hall of Famer. You let Mike Tomlin be the guy that motivates. You let Mike Tomlin be the guy that worries about the morale of the football team. You let Aaron Rodgers just go out there and chuck that thing all over the field to all his big-time weapons, get Pat Freiermuth involved, hit Van Jefferson, find Donald Parham in the red zone, make Mike Williams have a jump ball over top of a defender. Aaron Rodgers is the guy that can distribute that football to everybody. To everybody. And Aaron Rodgers has been on a Jets team that's a losing football team with bad culture. What happens when you put him on a winning football team with good culture? It's a complete 180. It's a complete 180. That guy's going to be throwing the football all over the place. They're going to be bombs away. They're going to put a bunch of points on the board. Then we all know what TJ Watt and that defense is going to do. They're going to clamp down on teams. Cam Hayward, Minka Fitzpatrick. They're going to get after it. They're going to make it tough for the other team to score. We know that's the case with this Steelers football team. So you have an offense that's putting up points left and right, and you have a defense that's getting off the field on third down. What do you think's going to happen? They're going to win a lot of football games, and that's going to give them the chance to take control of the AFC North. If you want to compete with the Ravens in this division, you want to compete with a guy that might have been the best player in the NFL this past year in Lamar Jackson, you go get Aaron Rodgers with all the weapons they have, and you match firepower with firepower. That's how you do it. So If the Steelers want to take control of the AFC North, I think the path to this division leads to Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is the guy that can get you on top in the AFC North because he's that good at throwing the football, because he can feed these guys and make sure they're getting enough targets and enough catches per game. He'll keep everybody happy. Everybody will be on the up and up because they're scoring a lot of points, they're winning a lot of games. Then everybody's going to be having fun, which is the most important thing. Think about those post-game celebrations. The music's turned up. Everybody's dancing in the locker room. You can tell where this thing's going. Go get Aaron Rodgers and have some fun. Be an offense that is explosive, that nobody can stop. You're talking about one of the best offenses in the NFL at that point. They're simply better than your defense. There's nothing you can do because you're outgunned. You're dead in the water because Aaron Rodgers is throwing the football to DK Metcalf, Pat Freiermuth, the rest of these guys. I mean, when you're 3, 4, and 5th guys, and maybe even your 6th guy can chip in too. I mean, come on. And Aaron Rodgers is the guy delivering the football to all of them. You already know how this thing's going to turn out. DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, Van Jefferson, Mike Williams, and a little Donald Parham in the red zone. Oh, you know what I see? I see 30 points, 40 points, 30 points, 30 points, 40 points. Points are going to be put on the board in bunches. They're going to be running the score up on teams. I see an offense that's capable of dominating. That's how good they can be with Aaron Rodgers. You don't pass that up for Sam Darnold, who folded, once the stage got too big. You don't pass that up for Russell Wilson, who would fold when the stage gets too big. Those guys are not cut out for the playoffs. Sam Darnold, Russell Wilson are not cut out for the playoffs. When the defenses get better and the field gets smaller. The defenses are so good in the playoffs, the windows get smaller and it feels like the field is smaller because you can't run a toss play, because you can't hit those underneath routes, because the defense is just eating everything up. There's nothing there. There's no daylight. But with Aaron Rodgers, he's smart enough to look to the right and have the defense flow over to that side of the field and then come back to the left and beat you with his eyes. Because a great quarterback can look off. I don't trust Sam Darnold or Russell Wilson to look off a defense. I trust Aaron Rodgers to look off a defense. When he looks left and then comes back to the right, guess what? The flow of the play goes to his eyes. As a safety, you're taught to flow to the quarterback's eyes. So if he's looking at his ex-receiver to his left, which would be the defense's right, you're flowing as a safety to the right side of the field. Well, guess what? Aaron Rodgers came back to his right, which is the defense's left side of the field, and there's an opening there because he looked you off, which is what a future Hall of Fame quarterback is capable of doing. I don't trust these other quarterbacks to be able to fill those shoes and be able to get the job done in that regard. I trust Aaron Rodgers. And the Jets are a dysfunctional mess. The problems there are bigger than the quarterback situation. It doesn't matter who you plug in there. The Jets are going to be the Jets. They're going to be dysfunctional. Like I said, plug Aaron Rodgers into this offense and watch what happens. It's too good to be true. It's Steelers fans' wishes being fulfilled. Now, don't get me wrong. I feel like Steelers fans would be like, we don't want him. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Because once you get over the initial pushback of, I don't think he's a team player, I don't think he's coachable, I don't think he's going to buy in, and once you see this team scoring 30 or 40 points a game, you're going to be like, okay, this was the right guy for the situation. And Steelers fans quickly will accept Aaron Rodgers when he starts winning games and when you realize how good your team is. Initially, they won't, but once the wins and the stats, the touchdowns start pouring in, watch how quickly the Steelers fans have a change of heart. Watch how quickly that happens. They're going to embrace him. Initially, they're going to be like, we don't want him. We all know the story. I'm not buying it. Aaron Rodgers is still a super talented football player that was in a really bad situation with the Jets. You don't have to like him. You don't have to agree with his philosophies or ideologies. That doesn't matter. We're here to play football. We're here to watch football. I don't care what your political beliefs are. I don't care if you're a Buddhist, a Christian, a Muslim. I don't care about any of those things. The only thing I care about is football. The only thing I care about is whether you produce on the field. And that goes for life as well. I don't care what walk of life you're from. I based, how I evaluate you off whether or not you're a productive human being, whether or not you have good character. Now, in this situation, Aaron Rodgers has great football character. You might not like his character off the field. Like I said, you might not like his philosophies or ideologies. That's fine. But when it comes to football and when it comes to playing his position and with the right team, he's going to end up having great football character just because he's the guy that can go bombs away for this offense. You might say he's uncoachable or he doesn't buy in or he's a team cancer. But with the Steelers and with this situation, and because they check all these boxes, none of that's going to matter. That's going to look like an old memory with the Jets. And the Jets' dysfunction made Aaron Rodgers look worse than he really is. He's not really that bad. Now, some people might push back and be like, he skipped he skipped training camp or OTAs or whatever he skipped, and that's not good for the team. You might have a fair argument there. Maybe he should have been there getting the reps in with his teammates. But, when you have guys that can run like the wind, when you have a guy like DK Metcalf that can box out defenders and be physical and, make the catch through the contact. When you have George Pickens, the flashy receiver who can slash and get open and who's quick and strong. Well, guess what? Aaron Rodgers, it's going to be the exact opposite of the Jets. All his strengths will be amplified. With the Jets, he looked worse than he really is. With the Steelers, all his strengths are going to be amplified. He's going to look like a model citizen. He's going to be kissing babies. He's going to be signing little kids' autographs. It's going to be a nonstop party because the team is going to have everything they need to be successful in the National Football League, which trumps everything. Winning trumps everything in the National Football League. It doesn't matter what your personalities are like, because when you're winning, that takes care of everything. So that's what I think is going to happen with this Steelers football team. Like I said, I have no sources on this. It's purely speculation. But look at all these weapons. The stage has been set. All this team is looking for is a quarterback, and I think the right quarterback for the job is Aaron Rodgers. Thank you guys for listening to the Football Game Tonight podcast. I'm your host, John Kuzma. I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you want to subscribe to the Football Game Tonight podcast, you can look in the episode description, click the link, and sign up, become a member. I think it's like $1 a month to be a member, so we appreciate anybody that signs up and becomes a member. Check us out wherever podcasts are found. This is the Football Game Tonight podcast. I'm John Kuzma. I'm signing off. Thanks for tuning in.